Welcome to Transformative Principle, where I help you stop putting out fires and start leading. I am your host, Jethro Jones. You can follow me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. Welcome to Transformative Principle. I am your host, Jethro Jones, and excited to be here. The Transformative Principle podcast is a proud member of the B Podcast Network. We got great shows for everybody. So if you're listening and you want to know something more about your role in education, there's a podcast at bpodcastnetwork.com. And if you don't find one, then we need to make one. So reach out and let's make a podcast, because everybody needs to have their own individualized personal professional development that helps them grow. And today I'm excited to have on the program someone who's good at helping people grow. That is Chad Dumas. He's been on the show before, so go back in the archives and check out that episode. There's a link to it in the show notes at transformativeprinciple.org. But he is a Solution Tree PLC and RTI at Work Assessment and Priority Schools Associate, an international consultant, presenter, and award-winning researcher. He's written 3 books: Let's Put the C in PLC, an action guide to put the C in PLC, and his newest book, the Teacher Team Leader Handbook. And this one is focused on teacher team leaders. And so we all know that educators sometimes get thrust into these leadership positions, maybe because they're good in their classroom, maybe because they're good leaders, but Chad delivers a wealth of knowledge on how to actually help those people be successful. So, Chad, welcome to Transformative Principle. Great to have you here.
Thank you, my friend. It's great to see you again.
Yes, you too. So, your book is really focused on 2 things: who you are and what you do. And so I want to talk first about that idea, because so often we get involved in the strategies and the tactics, and we can actually solve a lot of problems before we even get to any of that by the different way we approach things, the different mindsets we have, and things like that. So tell us about the difference between who you are and what you do.
Oh, yeah. So, as you said, teachers many times get thrown into, if you will, these team leader roles, and because they're either good teachers or respected by staff, or maybe a combination of the two. And dealing with adults is different than dealing with students on a variety of levels. And so thinking about who we are and what we do as 2 sides of the same coin. And sometimes I refer to that as being and doing. Who you are and what you do. And you're exactly right. If we just skip to the doing part, which is in some ways kind of the sexy part, right? Like that's the really attractive, like that's what we want to get to. Just give me a tool, give me a process. The problem is if we jump to those tools or processes without really being clear about who we are, about our role, our assumptions, and our mindsets, those tools can become or at least be perceived as manipulative. And that's not helpful.
Yeah. Now,
right?
Right there, like that piece, so like people call it the dark side, going over to leadership or administration, because it seems like you are being manipulative, and people may not be able to articulate that well. But when you implement the strategies and they are not true to who you are, that's
Right.
where the real challenge comes, because
Yes.
people can tell you're not being truthful about who you really are in doing this. Can you give a couple of examples? I've got a couple too, but I want to hear some examples of where this really is obvious.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of some folks I've worked with over the years who others did not perceive them as being genuine and authentic. And what they pointed their finger to was when they would interact with this person, they would always reframe what the other person said by saying, I think what I hear you saying is, which just like that phrase, I think what I hear you saying is, there's like 3 I's in that sentence. And all of a sudden it becomes about them. And then they would rephrase, but with their own take, and they wouldn't really be after finding out whether or not that was actually what they thought they heard you say. because then they would go on into their own agenda. And that whole series becomes perceived as manipulative, even though they're using the skill of paraphrasing, for example. They may be even using skills of pausing as part of that. But if there's not that purity of intention, then that whole series of actions becomes perceived as manipulative.
Yeah, and that's a great illustration because we're told all the time that we need to do active listening and paraphrase what people are saying and make sure we seek to understand first, which that sounds like what that is, but
Right.
when it comes down to it, that's not always the case. And so if you have a particular agenda or a particular perspective and you're not willing to actually hear what someone else says and you're like, I think what I hear you saying is this is absolute baloney and I'm not going to listen to anything else that you say because you're an idiot. That's what comes out of your mouth. Even if you're saying all the right things, the
Right.
feeling and the intention, that's what comes out. And that makes it really difficult. And so it can't just be about the strategy and the tactics. Any others that come to mind?
No others, not off the top of my head, but what you were just saying made me think about um, coherence. And I think of my own self and striving to live a life of coherence. And what I mean by that is that I'm the same person when I'm with my wife as I am when I'm with my kids, as I am when I'm with building administrators, as I am with a team of teachers, as I am in the grocery store, that there's this coherence in my life. And I think that's also this idea of being and doing, where there's that coherence. And in order to be coherent, we have to be aware of who we are as people. And so raising these assumptions and mindsets, and I'm not saying you have to hold these. What you do have to do is raise what are your assumptions and mindsets in dealing with other people so that you can make sure that you're authentic and coherent.
Yeah. Well, and I am reminded of the advice I got my first year as an assistant principal, where we had a consultant. He was like 80 years old and had been doing this for generations, literally like 60 years. He'd been a school leader or working with school leaders.
Wow.
And he said, if there's one thing I can tell you, Jethro, it's that you don't ever blame any decision on the district office. You either fight like crazy to make that thing not happen, or you own it and you say, this is my decision. And if you can't believe that, then you're not cut out for this. And if you can't believe that you either go to bat like crazy to get rid of that decision overturned, or it is 100% yours, then you're not going to be long for this world. And that was him basically saying, you gotta, if you're gonna make a decision, you gotta own it 100%. And even if you think it's a terrible idea, you're still making that decision. Otherwise, you need to go against the powers that be and refuse to do it. And so I did that a few times in my career, but one time in particular, I said, we are not spending one day a week for 6 weeks preparing for the state test. We're just not going to do it. And so we're going to do one practice day to make sure that all the technology works. And it's going to be 30 minutes and everybody's going to get on. And once they're on, then we're going to call it good. We're not going to take the test and all that. We're just going to check the technology. And the district was like, no, you have to do this. And I said, well, I'm just not going to. If that means that like you're going to fire me about this, then do that. But we're not losing all this instructional time so that we can play this game of making sure things work for the test. When if we're not confident that it's going to work for the test, we shouldn't be doing that stuff, right? Like there are bigger issues at play here. And so we did that and it worked out fine, but I was like, there's no way that I am going to endorse us doing this. And my staff was like, we're nervous about this test. But because I wasn't nervous and felt confident, they were like, okay, maybe we don't need to be nervous. Yeah. So all their teacher friends at other schools are like, oh, we're panicking. And they were like, well, we just haven't done anything with it. And so we can't, there's nothing to stress about. And that was actually a really helpful thing for everyone to experience, because we ended up not needing to stress about it at all, and
Yeah,
everything turned
yeah.
out fine.
And what you're, I think one of the key things I take away from that great story, Jethro, is the importance of integrity.
Yeah.
And not only integrity, but first of all, being aware of what are your values. Many times we haven't raised those values, raised those beliefs, and one of the assumptions of the district office, if you will, was, hey, um, if we do more test prep, kids will do better.
Yeah.
And your assumption is if we do more quality instructional environment, kids will do better.
Yeah.
And you were clear about that, and then acted with integrity in that way.
And that goes back to your piece about coherence.
Yeah.
Like, I need to know what my values are. So let's talk about values for a minute, because this is something that I harp on people a lot. Is you have to be true to your values and clear about what those values are.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not, then it's really easy for those things to for you to not come across as authentic, and for you to look manipulative, and all that stuff. So what advice do you give to someone who's new in this role of being a teacher leader, and they've just been in the classroom and now they're supposed to lead their peers? Uh,
Yeah.
how do you help them be true to who they are and know what their values are?
Yeah. So I start with clarity about what the responsibilities are of a teacher team leader. And I've not seen anybody articulate what the responsibilities are. Typically, it's, hey, go off and good luck. No news is good news. Let us know if, right?
As long as I
So
don't hear anything bad, then you get to keep that job.
it must
Yeah.
be okay. And as long as there's no, objects flying during meetings, we'll be okay. And what I articulate is three responsibilities. And the third is the one where you might hear people talk about, but it's actually the least important of the three. The first two responsibilities that are the most important. So the first responsibility is to make the space safe, psychological safety. I'm not talking physical safety, I'm talking psychological safety. So that's without psychological safety, that team's not going to go anywhere. And there's components of what that means to create that psychological safety. And then the second responsibility is to build capacity. That if you're not building capacity as a team leader, then as soon as you go, right, somebody else isn't going to be able to step up. And we want to build the capacity of everybody to provide leadership. And then the third responsibility, it's the least important of them, is about doing the work. And there is work that needs to be done. However, that work's not going to be effective or efficient if we don't have psychological safety, and if we don't have a mindset of that responsibility of building capacity. So I think anybody who's starting on the role has to begin with that foundation. What is your role? Your role is to ensure the effective functioning of the team. Now, what's the purpose of the team, right? Because I just said in that role, ensure the effective functioning team. So what is the purpose of the team? The purpose of the team is to guarantee learning. Guarantee, like, these are big words, huge words that we could spend an entire episode on. What does it mean to guarantee learning? And it's
Yeah.
not any old learning, it's guaranteeing learning of team identified, grade level, essential outcomes. So we've got the role, guarantee or ensure the functioning of the team, the purpose of the team, guarantee learning, and then the three responsibilities of make it safe, build capacity, and do the work. And then from there, now we can move forward into, okay, so what does that mean for me as a person and for the work that I do?
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that approach, and especially the responsibilities, because there could be a whole bunch of other things that your principal may have told you are your responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, those all probably fall in the category of doing the work.
Yeah,
Like, hold a meeting, go over this data, do these observations, whatever those things are. Those are all doing the work, and you're absolutely right that those are the uh, the least important of the three. So the psychological safety piece, though,
mm-hmm.
that one that one is a really big deal, because
Huge.
it basically comes down to, if there's not psychological safety, then again, nothing else matters. It doesn't matter what data you talk about. It doesn't matter what practices you implement. It doesn't matter how you talk to people, because if they don't feel psychologically safe, they're not going to trust you and move forward. Period. End of story. What else would you add there?
Yes, and sometimes, so I've been fortunate to be able to do some 1 and 2 day trainings on this topic. And when I raise this idea of psychological safety, I'd say 9 times out of 10 people will say, "Oh yeah, we have psychological safety." And then when you dig into it, what they have is nice. I grew up and was born and raised, and most of my career was in Nebraska. And for about 10 years, the tourist slogan for Nebraska was Nebraska, nice. And it became like this thing in the state. We were like, yeah, we're just Nebraska nice. And what does that mean? That to your face, we're going to smile, we're going to nod. And then when the meeting's over, when we're in the parking lot with our car keys in hand, that's where the real conversation happens. That's how you know you don't have psychological safety. Psychological safety is that when you're in the environment, and there's two things. Duhigg did a study with Google about 8, 10 years ago, huge, massive study with the Google Corporation to find out what makes for an effective team. And they looked at all kinds of factors for what makes a team effective. And you can imagine the hypotheses going into this, thinking, oh, in order to be effective, you have to have high levels of expertise or a lot of experience or people who are really good at their job or good treats. Right? You could think about all the different hypotheses, and what they found was there was psychological safety, and that boiled down to two things. One is the degree to which folks social sensitivity is the shorthand term. Social sensitivity, that's the degree to which people read and respond appropriately to the nonverbal cues that we give. It's all nonverbal communication. That is the first part of social sensitivity. The second part is equity of turn taking. So equity of turn taking is pretty easy to take care of in a meeting, right? You can develop some protocols, use inclusion activities, use turn and talks, use pair shares, use talking sticks, a whole variety of ways to establish equity of turn taking. That's pretty easy. The hard part of psychological safety, according to this study, is that social sensitivity. Some of us have that, some of us don't. And so we have to develop that. What does that mean? First of all, we have to know what are the nonverbal moves and techniques that others are using. And then how can I, as a teacher team leader, respond appropriately to be able to influence the group to move in a positive direction towards that goal of ensuring effective functioning of the team.
Well, and the amazing thing here is going back to what we said before is that if you're not genuine in what you're saying, then it means nothing. So equity and turn taking does not increase psychological safety if everybody gets to say their piece and you're going to decide on your own anyway, right? Unless you
Yes.
say that out front and say, and so this is something that I counsel principals all the time with is if you have made a decision already, you just need to
Mm-hmm.
say what that decision is.
Right. Yes.
And people can come and complain to you after the fact, but you need to be clear. So there's a strategy that people often talk about where you let everybody else talk and then you have the final word as the leader. And that's fine if you don't have a decision that's made yet. But
Yeah.
if you know, like,
Yeah.
hey, this is what we're gonna do, and you're sure about it, then you need to get that out up front and say, here's what I'm saying. This is my stance. If we're going to do anything different, you have to convince me of something otherwise. This is now your chance to try to convince me. But let me tell you, it's going to be pretty hard because I'm probably not going to change my mind. It is perfectly acceptable. That actually does help with psychological safety for you to be
Yes.
that clear about it.
Yes.
What would you add there?
I love that. And what I share with principals that I'm working with is coming back to, I don't remember who the author is that identified the 4 quadrants of decision making for a
Mm-hmm.
principal, or for a leader. But what you just described is one of those quadrants, maybe two. And the 4 different types, and I don't remember which quadrant any of them are, but like the first type of decision is I'm just going to make it. I don't want input. Too bad. I've made the decision, or I will make the decision. Those are pretty rare. An example might be, God forbid, an intruder in the school with a gun.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to call a committee together to get input on which way we're going to go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make that decision.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I don't want your input.
Yeah.
A second type of decision is I'm going to make the decision, but I do want your input. I may not, like you said, like I may not change, but I want your input in that decision. A third is I'm going to make the decision, but I want your recommendation. So that might be going to a committee and it'll be recommended. That is I didn't give an example for the second one, but that one is like a curriculum materials. Typically school boards
Mm-hmm.
make those decisions, but they need a recommendation from the school, right? From a committee of some sort, typically. And then the fourth kind of decision is we're going to make that decision together.
Mm-hmm.
And I counsel principals just like you do. Be it clear up front. Don't change, right? Which kind of decision is this from the get-go? And that's the kind. And if this is a kind of decision that we're going to make it together, then you got to be that, and you can't midway be like, oh, I don't want to like where this decision is going.
Yeah.
I'm going to change it, right?
Yeah.
You got to stay with it. And I've seen many a decision that a principal has made, or not a principal, a team made with a principal, that the principal came to me and said, I don't really know if this is the right decision, but I think this will work out in the long run. And it does.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of going back to your earlier story of, making a decision or following through on a decision from district office. I read once that, if you work to implement a decision that you disagree with, the sooner it will become clear that it was the wrong decision.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's a decision that you don't like, work harder to implement it. Because if you work against it, we'll never know if the reason why that decision failed was because it was the wrong decision or we had people working against it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so work to implement that decision, especially when you disagree with it.
Yeah. Because when you disagree with it, you'll find every possible flaw along the way and put those flags up saying, "Yep, this is wrong. I was right. This is wrong. I was right. This is wrong." And it may never actually get the legs it needs to actually succeed.
Right.
And yeah, I think that's important. We've spent the bulk of our time talking about the being part and
Mm-hmm,
very
mm-hmm.
little about the doing part.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the reason is because it's so important to know that if you're not being genuine and you don't really believe in the things that you're talking about and stuff, then they come across that way very easily.
Mm-hmm,
But
yeah,
I wonder if you might share one non-verbal
yeah.
and one like actual thing you can do,
Mm-hmm,
assuming that your being is aligned.
mm-hmm.
What's one nonverbal and one actual verbal thing that you can do as a teacher team leader to move your team forward? What would be,
Yeah.
you got a lot in there, so we're not going to get to all of them. So go buy the book, the Teacher Team Leader Handbook, and check it out. But we'll give you a little taste here. The first one's free, as they say.
A taste test.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's actually 40 actions, 40, that I go into detail with on those. So the first one I would say that is comes from the nonverbal communication world, communication intelligence, communication science. Let me just preface it a little bit. Most of your listeners, I'm pretty sure, are familiar with the idea that goes back to Mehrabian's research that like 93% of communication is nonverbal or whatever. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's these numbers that are pulled out of thin air, which just as an aside, a little asterisk and down on the side, that's actually a misrepresentation of the data. It actually has to do with likability, not with communication.
Mm-hmm.
Setting that aside, I think we can all agree that nonverbal skills are pretty darn important. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not as much what you say as how you say it.
Yeah.
So, in the field of human behaviors, of human patterns, nonverbal communication patterns, excuse me,
We'll just edit that out.
excuse me, in the world of nonverbal communication patterns, the single most impactful nonverbal pattern is the pause. Out of about 50, there's about 50 patterns, and it is the single most impactful. It has influence on respiration, on heart rate, on blood pressure, on the release of endorphins and adrenaline in the bloodstream. It's just really remarkable. The pause, simply taking a breath. Let's think about that for a second. And you can combine that with some other nonverbal moves like breaking eye contact, with freezing a gesture that's literally holding your hand some way and just freezing it, coupled with a deep breath, an in breath that can be heard, which then also facilitates other people taking a breath. It can be conscious, it can be unconscious. There's a number of ways to create that pause, to create that space, just to allow the prefrontal cortex to catch up with the amygdala, right? The front thinking part of the brain, as opposed to the back, so-called reptilian part of the brain.
So I like that one because it's something that is actually probably wise to do, and you don't necessarily have to be aligned to do that, right? So if you just pause, like 99% of the time, taking a breath is the right thing to do, not the wrong thing to do.
Yep.
Every once in a while, you need to like make a decision faster, but most of us are not in those kind of situations ever in our life, let alone when we're leading a team meeting. So
exactly,
we're probably okay to take a pause most of the time and just slow it down for a minute and let things go. I like that.
Yeah. It's brilliant. It's like magic. Like well, as I said, like the science backs it up. The single most powerful pattern that we have as human beings is the pause. It literally affects respiration, heart rate, blood pressure, and more.
Yeah, very good. All right, so now give one that is not a nonverbal, but a physical action or a thing to say or some other action.
Yeah. So let's do this one. So this is one that also is just like magic. It's actually one that I kind of refer to as a trio that I call the three magic moves, because they really are literally like magic. And it's called Third Point. It comes from a gentleman named Michael Grinder. And what he references is like a first point in any conversation is yourself. The second point is other people. A third point is a tangible, non-living something or other. So in a meeting, that might be an agenda. So the importance of having a posted agenda that we can all look at as a third point. It might be data. In a meeting with a student who you're having a challenging conversation with, it might be something that's written down on a sheet of paper on the table in front of us that we can look at. So the third point, it's really literally magic, because it shifts our energy away from potentially having conflict between the two of us as people, as effective personal conflict. Now we can have conflict about this thing. Now, an agenda clearly wouldn't be necessarily conflict, but an agenda gives us a third point to be able to like create some synergy and some energy in the same direction where we're all looking at that third point. But in terms of data or any time there's conflict, get out a third point at some point. Get out some chart paper. Hey, if you're feeling the tension starting to rise, hey, let's capture some of these thoughts on this whiteboard or this chart paper so we can make sure that we have what we're saying captured. Does this capture our thinking, right? And now the conflict is here on that third point, which is so powerful because now we can engage in cognitive conflict, which is necessary. If we want to maximize our work, then we got to get ourselves pushing each other. I've heard the saying that if there's three of us in the room and we all agree, two of us are unnecessary, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let's access that expertise. And third point is a really powerful move to be able to get everybody's voices in the room in a safe manner.
Yeah. Well, and so I'll add one that I just love and that I use in all of my coaching sessions. And this one is like the same kind of magic. And before I say it, I'll say here's why I use it.
Okay.
Number one, it reaffirms to me what I did that brought value to the conversation, and it reaffirms to the person who's answering it what value they derived from the conversation. So I typically use this in coaching situations, but it works in any kind of other meeting, because if you had a meeting you want there to be some value added to it, right? That it was meaningful and worthwhile. So this is the question: what was most valuable to you today? And it's from the Michael Bungay Stainier's The Coaching Habit book. And I ask that at the end of every regular meeting that I have, any coaching meeting, just to catch up with somebody. That is so powerful because it reminds somebody, why was I here, and why do I want to remember this in a positive way? And that one, like, finish your next team meeting with that question, and you'll get some great responses. And what I love is when people say things that have nothing to do with anything we were talking about.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, so the value you got from this was not that, like, I did X, Y, or Z, or we helped these kids or these teachers or whatever. The value was this other thing that I didn't even see coming. That's when it's really cool, because that just gives you another layer of connection and relation to that person, which is fantastic. So the last question that I ask in the podcast is a little different. What is one thing that a principal can do, or a teacher team leader can do this week to be a transformative leader like you, Chad?
Yeah, there's so many things, but I think given the tenor of this conversation, where we've gone, is to maybe take a few minutes and sit down in your favorite, most comfortable chair and think about your intentions as a person and as a leader, and maybe jot some thoughts down. Like, what are your intentions? Which is different than a hope, right? A hope is kind of cast into the universe. An intention is cast into the universe, and then we make effort to make it happen. And so I think that might be in line with our conversation today, to think about what are your intentions as a human and as a leader, and how you can then align your actions to better meet those intentions.
Yeah, and you can do that in 5 to 10 minutes, just sitting down. Put your phone away, put your book away, like, be distraction free, and just think, what are my intentions?
Or maybe in a drive.
Yeah.
In your drive to the grocery store or something, right? Or,
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep. So I actually did this, Chad. I'm glad you brought this up, because I actually did this a few months ago. And I was like, what do I really want? Like, when I meet with somebody, what's my real purpose here? Because, as a consultant, I'm like selling, I'm trying to get people on my podcast. Like, there's all these things where I'm trying to get things from people, and it's so easy for things to be transactional. And so I did this, and I was like, you know what? I want to think long term, and I want to do long term things. And so one of the intentions that came out is that when I meet with somebody, I want it to be the first time I meet with them, I want the clock to start ticking, that we're going to be in this relationship for at least the next 10 years. And I've started saying that on calls with people, especially people I first meet, and I say, look, I don't know where this is going to go, but I anticipate that we're going to be connected for the next 10 years. And I have a note-taking system that I use where I put people's names in and the dates that we met and that kind of stuff. And so I know when we started. And so I can go look up the person that I met with and say, oh, you know what? We met on this day, and this was our first meeting. And so, like, you and I, our first meeting was June 27th, 2021. That is nearly 5 years ago. And, 4 years ago, nearly 4 years ago. We are almost halfway through our expected 10-year relationship. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I hope it goes longer.
I hope so too.
10 years isn't long enough.
Yeah, that's really what it's getting to, right? At least 10 years. So like, if we don't do business together, or we don't do whatever, or something quote unquote big doesn't happen, that's okay, because we still have time, and so it doesn't end. And by having that as my intention, then it takes a lot of pressure off, and I don't feel like I have to get something out of a out of a thing. And for me personally, that has been transformative in a big way, because I don't feel the pressure anymore, and I don't feel like it has to be a certain thing, and it just takes off so much stress, which is a powerful, powerful thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. I love that. I also love the long term nature of it.
Yeah.
Like this is valuing others as more than, like you said, transactional. It's as human beings
Hmm.
looking to the long run.
Yeah. So with this perspective, when you emailed me and said, "Hey, can I come on the podcast again?" I was like, you know what? He's someone that I want to be in that 10-year relationship with.
Mm.
And if I have an opportunity to serve him by having him come on the podcast, then that's great. He can serve me by being a
Mm-hmm.
guest on the podcast. And I know we're going to have a good conversation. And it's not like I need something from you in order for that to work, but
Mm-hmm.
because I have this long-term thing of, you know, I want to be there for my friends. I want to support them. I want to help spread the word about the good things that they're doing. And this has been a great conversation today. It's worthwhile to invest in that time, even though sometimes, like, you don't want to do it, you know? And you're like,
Yeah.
it's late in the day. I'd rather go lay out in the hammock because it's beautiful outside. But let's do this thing and continue developing and deepening this relationship. It is worth it to take that long-term view. And so
Yeah.
I would invite people to take the time to think about your intentions, like Chad suggested, and see how you can align your actions to it. That's a really powerful thing to do this week. So thank you,
Mm.
Chad. There's a link to his book, a link to his website, everything in the show notes at transformativeprinciple.org. So go check it out. And Chad, thanks again for being part of Transformative Principle today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so very much.